I, 32, F. Always believed my marriage to Mark, 34, M. was a partnership. We built our life on what I thought was a foundation of mutual respect and shared dreams. The cracks, however, started to show the moment my grandfather passed away. His death was a deep and personal loss, but it was the inheritance he left me that became the earthquake that shattered everything. He left me his house, a place filled with memories of my childhood, and a significant sum of money meant to secure my future. It was a generous, life-changing gift from a man I adored. I thought Mark would see it as a blessing for both of us, a way for us to finally be free from financial worry. I was wrong. The first time he brought it up, it was subtle. We were sitting at the kitchen table going over bills. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This would all be so much easier if we just had a little more cushion," he said. I nodded, agreeing. "I know. Things are tight. That money from your grandfather," he said, tapping a pen on the table. "It could be that cushion. We could pay off the car, the credit cards. We could even put a down payment on a bigger place." I felt a small knot of discomfort in my stomach. "Mark, that money is for our future. A real future, not just paying off today's bills. Granddad wanted it to be an investment, something that would grow." "Our future is now," he said, his voice a little sharper than before. "What is the point of having money sitting in an account when we are struggling right here, right now?" I tried to explain my feelings. I told him how my grandfather had worked his entire life, saving and investing so that I could have a head start he never did.
It was not just money to me.
It was his legacy. It was a symbol of his love and his belief in me. Mark did not seem to understand that. To him, it was just a number in a bank account, a solution to our immediate problems. His mother, Diane, did not help things. She called me a few days later, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Clara, dear," she said, "I hear you have come into a little windfall. How wonderful for you both." "It was very kind of my grandfather," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Of course. A wonderful man," she said. "Mark tells me you are thinking of investing it. That is so clever of you. But you know, sometimes the best investment is in your own home, in your own marriage. Paying off debts, that frees you up in ways you cannot imagine." It would be such a weight off my poor Mark's shoulders. The pressure was starting to build. It was not a request anymore. It was an expectation. Mark and his mother started talking about the money as if it were already theirs to spend. They made plans. They talked about new furniture, a vacation, a new car for him. Every time I tried to gently steer the conversation back to my wishes, to my grandfather's intentions, I was met with a wall of dismissive sighs and accusations of being selfish. "It is our money, Clara," Mark said one night, his voice rising in frustration. "When we got married, we became one. What is yours is mine. Why are you acting like this is only yours?" "Because it is," I said, my own voice trembling slightly. "My grandfather left it to me, not to us."
To me.
He wanted me to be secure. "And you would not be secure with me?" he asked, his eyes hard. "Is that what you're saying? That you do not trust me to take care of you, to take care of us?" That was the line that truly hurt. He was twisting my desire to honor my grandfather's wishes into a personal attack on him, on our marriage. He was making me feel guilty for wanting to be responsible. He was making me feel like the bad guy for not immediately handing over my inheritance for him and his mother to spend on fleeting things. This was the moment I realized that this was not just a disagreement about money.
It was about control.
He saw my inheritance not as a gift to me, but as a resource for him. And he was not going to stop until he had it. The loving partnership I thought we had was starting to feel like a business transaction where I was the only one with any assets. The pressure from Mark and Diane intensified over the next few weeks. It was a constant, low-level hum of manipulation that wore me down day by day. Every conversation, no matter how it started, eventually circled back to the inheritance. If I mentioned I was tired, Mark would say, "Well, you would not be so stressed if we did not have these bills hanging over our heads." If I suggested we go out for a simple dinner, Diane would chime in with, "Oh, you two should be saving your pennies." Unless, of course, you're planning to use that other money. They were a team, a well-oiled machine of guilt and persuasion. They made me feel like I was hoarding a treasure while they were starving. They painted a picture of a bleak future, all because of my stubbornness. I started to doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Was I wrong to hold onto the one thing that felt truly mine, the last tangible piece of my grandfather's love? I tried to talk to my best friend, Sarah, about it. She listened patiently as I poured out my confusion and frustration over coffee one afternoon. "It sounds like they are ganging up on you, Clara," she said, her expression serious. "I know," I sighed, stirring my latte. "But maybe they are right. Maybe I am being unreasonable. We are married, after all." "Being married does not mean you give up your identity," Sarah said firmly. "Or your inheritance. Your grandfather left that money to you for a reason. He trusted you to be smart with it. He did not leave it to Mark. Mark says what is mine is his," I mumbled. "That is a lovely sentiment when you are talking about sharing a pizza," she said. "It is a red flag when you are talking about a huge sum of money that one person is trying to take from the other. Think about it, Clara. Have they presented a budget? A financial plan? Or are they just talking about new cars and vacations?" Her words hit home. They had not talked about a plan. They had only talked about spending. There was no discussion of long-term investments, of building a secure future together. It was all about immediate gratification, about solving their problems with my money. I realized Sarah was right. This was not about our future. It was about their present. The realization made me feel cold. I looked back at my marriage, at the small moments I had brushed aside. Mark's tendency to make financial decisions without consulting me. Diane's constant advice that always seemed to benefit her son. The way they both dismissed my career as a little hobby, even though my income was steady and important to our household. The pattern was there all along. I had just refused to see it. That evening, I tried a different approach with Mark. I sat him down and laid out my own plan. "I have been thinking," I said calmly. "I want to use a portion of the inheritance to pay off our highest interest credit card. Then I want to invest the rest in a diversified portfolio. We can use the dividends to supplement our income, and the principal will continue to grow. In a few years, we will be in a much stronger financial position." I thought it was a reasonable compromise. I was offering to use some of the money to help with our current debts, while still honoring my grandfather's wish to secure my future. Mark's reaction told me everything I needed to know. He did not see it as a compromise. He saw it as a refusal. "A portfolio," he scoffed. "Dividends? Clara, that is play money.
We need real money, now."
We need to pay off the car. We need to fix the roof. My mother needs a new furnace. These are real problems, not numbers on a spreadsheet. "Your mother's furnace is her responsibility," I said, my voice gaining a steely edge. "And we can budget for the roof. We do not need to liquidate my entire inheritance to live." "So that is it then," he said, standing up and pacing the room. "You are just going to sit on that pile of cash while we struggle, while your husband and his mother have to worry about making ends meet. Some wife you are." He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sat there, stunned and heartbroken. He had not just rejected my plan. He had rejected me. He had made it clear that my only value to him at that moment was the money I possessed. The love and respect I thought we shared felt like an illusion. In its place was a greedy, entitled man who saw me not as his partner, but as his personal bank. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was only the beginning. He was not going to give up. He was going to escalate. And I needed to be ready. The days that followed were filled with a tense, suffocating silence. Mark was cold and distant, treating me like a stranger in our own home. He would give one-word answers to my questions and spend his evenings on the couch, staring at his phone, pointedly ignoring me. The warmth that had once defined our relationship was gone, replaced by a bitter chill. Diane, on the other hand, escalated her campaign. Her calls became more frequent, her tone shifting from cloying sweetness to passive-aggressive disappointment. "I just worry about you too," she would say, her voice heavy with manufactured concern. Mark is so stressed. He is not sleeping. He carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, you know. It is a shame he has to do it all alone. Every word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to make me feel guilty and selfish. She spoke of Mark's supposed suffering as if I were the direct cause of it. She never once acknowledged that their financial struggles were the result of their own poor planning and impulsive spending, not my refusal to hand over my inheritance. I tried to hold my ground, but it was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly on the defensive, justifying my decisions to two people who had no intention of listening. My home, which should have been my sanctuary, felt like a courtroom where I was perpetually on trial. I started spending more time at work, taking on extra projects just to have an excuse to stay late. I found more peace in my office cubicle than I did in my own living room. One evening, I came home late, tired from a long day. I found Mark and Diane sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of them. They looked up when I walked in, their expressions a mixture of surprise and something else, something that looked like guilt. "What is all this?" I asked, setting my bag down on the counter. "Oh, hello, dear," Diane said, quickly gathering the papers into a neat stack. "Mark and I were just doing a little financial planning, trying to figure out a path forward." "A path forward?" I repeated, my eyes narrowing. "Without me?" "We did not want to bother you," Mark said quickly, his gaze shifting away from mine. "You have been so busy with work." I felt a surge of anger. They were making decisions about our finances, but they were not including me in the conversation. It was another power play, another way of isolating me and making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. That night, something inside me shifted. The hurt and confusion I had been feeling began to harden into a cold, clear resolve. I was done being made to feel guilty. I was done being manipulated. This was my inheritance, my future, and I was going to protect it. The next day, I made an appointment with a financial advisor, a woman Sarah had recommended. I needed a professional opinion, someone who could look at the situation objectively and give me sound advice. I gathered all my financial documents, including the details of my inheritance, and went to see her. Her name was Linda, and she was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, from my grandfather's wishes to Mark and Diane's relentless pressure. She did not interrupt me once. When I finished, she looked at the papers I had brought, her expression unreadable. "Your grandfather was a very wise man," she said finally. "This portfolio is well structured. He set you up for long-term security, not a short-term spending spree." "That is what I tried to tell them," I said, feeling a wave of relief. It was validating to hear a professional confirm what I already knew. "This pressure they are putting on you," Linda continued, leaning forward. "It is not about financial planning. It is about control. They want to control you by controlling your money. You need to be very careful, Clara." She then walked me through the numbers, showing me projections of how the investment would grow over time. She explained the tax implications of liquidating it versus letting it mature. She gave me concrete, factual reasons to support my position. By the time I left her office, I felt a renewed sense of strength. I was not just being emotional or selfish. I was being smart. I had facts on my side. Armed with this new confidence, I decided to try one more time to have a rational conversation with Mark. I came home that evening and found him in the living room, watching television. I turned it off. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. He sighed dramatically. "What is there to talk about, Clara? You have made your decision. You and your money are going to be very happy together." "I saw a financial advisor today," I said, ignoring his sarcasm. She confirmed that my plan for the inheritance is the most responsible and financially sound option. For both of us, in the long run. "Oh, a financial advisor," he sneered. "So you will listen to a stranger, but not your own husband?" "I will listen to facts and logic," I retorted. "Something you and your mother have not offered. All you have offered are demands and guilt trips. You talk about paying off debts, but you have not shown me a budget." You talk about being stressed, but you continue to spend money we do not have. That is not fair, he said, his voice rising. We are not extravagant. Really? I shot back. What about the new golf clubs you bought last month? Or the weekend trip your mother took that you paid for? Those were not necessities, Mark. Those were choices. You are asking me to sacrifice my future security to pay for your poor choices. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was not used to me confronting him so directly. He was used to me backing down, to me apologizing just to keep the peace. But the peace was already broken. All that was left was the truth. You do not get it, he finally managed to say. This is not about golf clubs. This is about respect. You are disrespecting me. You are disrespecting our marriage. No, Mark, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You are. You are disrespecting my grandfather's memory. You are disrespecting my intelligence. And you are disrespecting our vows by trying to bully me into submission. This is not a partnership anymore. This is a hostile takeover. And I will not allow it. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him speechless. I went to the spare bedroom and closed the door. I knew that conversation was a turning point. I had drawn a line in the sand. And I had a sinking feeling that he and his mother were about to try and cross it with a bulldozer. The battle was far from over. In fact, I was sure it had just begun. The catalyst came a week later. It was a Saturday morning. I had woken up with a sense of dread, a feeling that something was about to happen. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mark was not in bed beside me. I got up and went downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I found him in the dining room, sitting at the table with his mother. Between them was a stack of official-looking documents. My blood ran cold. Good morning, I said, my voice tight. What is this?
Mark would not look at me.
He just stared at the papers in front of him. It was Diane who answered, her voice smooth as silk. Good morning, dear. Mark and I were just going over some paperwork. We have found a way to solve all our problems. She slid one of the documents across the table towards me. I picked it up with a trembling hand. It was a power of attorney form. It would give Mark complete and total control over all my assets, including my inheritance. My name was already typed in at the top. All it needed was my signature. I stared at the paper, my mind reeling. This was not pressure anymore. This was a calculated, premeditated attempt to strip me of my financial independence. They had gone from asking and persuading to demanding and coercing. They had prepared a legal document behind my back. You cannot be serious, I whispered, looking from the paper to Mark's face. He still would not meet my eyes. It is the only way, Clara, he said, his voice low. We need to consolidate our finances. Make decisions as a unit. This will make everything simpler. Simpler for who? I asked, my voice rising with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Simpler for you? So you can spend my inheritance without having to ask my permission? It is not about spending, Diane interjected, her voice sharp. It is about security. With Mark managing everything, we can be sure the money is used wisely for the good of the family. The good of the family? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You mean the good of you and your son. This is insane. I will never sign this. I threw the paper back on the table. Mark finally looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Clara, please. Just listen. We have a plan. We have talked to a guy, a friend of my mom's. He knows how to make this money work for us. We could be set for life. A friend of your mom's? I repeated, my suspicion growing. What friend? What is his name? It does not matter, Mark said dismissively. The point is, he has a great opportunity for us. A real estate investment. But we have to act fast. We need to have the funds ready to go by Monday. It all clicked into place. The urgency, the secrecy, the power of attorney. This was not just about paying off debts anymore. They had a specific scheme in mind, some get-rich-quick idea that they were counting on my inheritance to fund. And they were willing to trick me, to force me to get their hands on it. No, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Absolutely not. I am not signing anything. This money is staying exactly where it is, in an account that you cannot touch. The atmosphere in the room changed. The pretense of concern and reason vanished, replaced by raw, ugly anger. Mark stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was dark, his jaw tight. "You are being incredibly selfish, Clara," he snarled. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and you are going to let it slip through our fingers because of your pride." "My pride?" I shot back. "This is not about pride. This is about you trying to steal my inheritance. You went behind my back, you drafted legal documents, you tried to corner me. This is not what a husband does. This is what a con artist does." Diane gasped, placing a hand over her heart. "How dare you speak to my son that way," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "After everything he has done for you. He has given you a home, a life. And this is how you repay him? By hoarding your money, like a dragon on a pile of gold." "This is my home too," I said, my voice rising to a shout. "And I have contributed to it every step of the way. My grandfather's gift was meant to be a safety net for me, not a slush fund for you and your son's bad ideas." The argument escalated, their voices growing louder, more desperate. They threw every accusation they could think of at me. I was ungrateful. I was disrespectful. I was ruining their lives. I was destroying our marriage. The words were like stones, and I felt bruised and battered by the onslaught. But I did not back down. The more they pushed, the more my resolve hardened. "I am not signing it," I said, my voice cutting through their tirade. "And that is my final answer." Mark's face contorted with fury. He took a step towards me, his body tense. "You'll sign it," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We are not going to lose this opportunity because you are being a stubborn fool. You will sign it, or you will regret it." His threat hung in the air between us, ugly and terrifying. The man I had married, the man I had loved, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a bully who was willing to threaten me to get what he wanted. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that my marriage was over. It had been over for a while, but I had been too blind, too hopeful, to see it. This was not just a fight about money. It was a fight for my own survival, for my own autonomy. And I knew I had to fight back. The discovery of the power of attorney form was a brutal wake-up call. It was no longer a matter of disagreement or pressure. It was a clear, calculated attempt to seize control of my life. The shock of it gave way to a cold, hard anger. I spent the rest of that Saturday in a daze, locked in the spare bedroom. I did not answer their knocks on the door. I did not respond to their muffled pleas and demands. I needed to think. I needed a plan. My first call was to Sarah. I told her everything, my voice flat and emotionless as I recounted the morning's events. The power of attorney, the mysterious real estate deal, the threat. "Oh, Clara," she breathed, her voice full of concern. "This is so much worse than I thought. You need to get out of there." "I am not running," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. "This is my house too. Well, part of it is. The inheritance house is all mine. I am not letting them bully me out of my own home." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to find out what they are really up to," I said. Mark mentioned a friend of his mother's, a real estate investment. He said they needed the money by Monday. That gives me a little bit of time. That night, after I was sure they were both asleep, I crept out of the spare room. The house was dark and silent. I went to Mark's home office, a small room off the living room where he kept his laptop. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would wake them up. I had a suspicion, a gut feeling that I could not ignore. I turned on his laptop. It was password protected, of course. But I knew Mark. He was lazy with passwords. I tried his birthday. No luck. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. The screen unlocked. A small, bitter smile touched my lips. Even in his deception, he was predictable. I went straight to his email. I searched for Diane's name. There were dozens of emails between them, most of them mundane. But then I found a chain from the past few weeks with the subject line, "The Project." My breath caught in my throat. I opened the first one. It was from Diane to Mark. It read, "Spoke to Gary. He says the deal is still on, but we need to show proof of funds soon. The seller is getting impatient. You need to convince her, Mark. There is too much riding on this."
Gary.
That must be the friend. I scrolled through the email chain, my eyes scanning the messages. They were a roadmap of their entire scheme. They had been planning this for months, ever since they found out about my grandfather's declining health. It was not a spur-of-the-moment idea. It was a deliberate, long-term plot. The real estate investment was a dilapidated commercial property in a rundown part of town. This Gary person, who I discovered was Diane's cousin with a history of failed business ventures, had convinced them it was a diamond in the rough. He claimed that a major developer was about to buy up the whole block, and they could flip the property for a massive profit. All they needed was the initial capital to buy it. My inheritance. As I read on, the deception got deeper and more sickening. They had already made an offer on the property, contingent on financing. They had forged my signature on a preliminary document, a letter of intent, using a copy of my signature from our mortgage papers. They were in deep, and they were counting on my money to bail them out. But the worst part was the email Mark had sent to his mother just 2 days ago. It read, "She is not budging. She is being completely irrational. I tried everything. I think we need to move on to Plan B. The power of attorney is our only shot. I will get her to sign it on Saturday. I will tell her it is just a formality to consolidate our accounts for a better mortgage rate. She will not read the fine print. She trusts me. He trusts me." The words echoed in my head. He was not just trying to take my money. He was exploiting my love and trust for him. He saw my faith in him as a weakness, a tool to be used against me. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it stole my breath. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I took out my phone and started taking pictures of the emails. Every single one. The initial plan, the forged signature, the talk of Plan B, the explicit admission that he was going to deceive me. I captured it all, my hands shaking so badly I had to take some of the pictures twice. This was my proof. This was my leverage. Then I dug deeper. I went into his browser history. I found searches for quick real estate flips, how to get power of attorney, and most chillingly, legal grounds for contesting a will. He had not just been planning to take my inheritance. He had been researching ways to fight me for it if I refused. I found a link to the county's public records website. On a hunch, I searched for the address of the commercial property mentioned in the emails. The records were public. I found the property's tax history. It was massively in arrears. I also found a list of recent liens against it. This was not a diamond in the rough, it was a money pit. Gary, Diane's cousin, was not a savvy investor. He was a scam artist, and he was taking my husband and mother-in-law for a ride. And they, in turn, were trying to drag me down with them. I saved everything. I emailed the photos of the emails to a new, secret email address I created on the spot. I downloaded the public records. I covered my tracks, deleting the browser history and the sent email. I shut down the laptop and crept back to the spare room, my mind racing. I now understood the full scope of their deception. This was not about paying off a few bills. It was a desperate, high-stakes gamble. They were in over their heads, and they saw me as their only way out. They were willing to lie, to forge my name, to threaten me, all to fund a doomed project. The love I thought I had for my husband was a mirage. The respect I expected from my mother-in-law was a joke. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as a bank. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the anger and hurt churning inside me. But beneath it all, a new feeling was taking root. A cold, hard determination. They had underestimated me. They thought I was a pushover, someone who would eventually crumble under pressure. They thought I was naive enough to sign a legal document without reading it. They were wrong. They had started a war. And now, armed with the truth, I was going to finish it. My first step was clear. On Monday morning, I was not going to be arguing with them. I was going to be meeting with a lawyer. The next day, Sunday, was one of the longest days of my life. I had to pretend that nothing was wrong, that I was just upset from our argument. I stayed in the spare room, telling them I needed space. In reality, I was meticulously planning my next moves. I spent hours online, researching family law attorneys in my city. I read reviews, checked their specialties, and made a short list of 3 top candidates. I drafted an email to each of them, giving a brief, non-identifying summary of my situation and requesting an urgent consultation. Mark knocked on the door in the afternoon. "Clara," he said, his voice soft and conciliatory. "Can we talk? I hate this." I opened the door a crack. "I do not think we have anything to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice cold. "Please," he said, and for a moment he looked like the man I had married, his face full of what looked like genuine remorse. "I was out of line yesterday. We both were. Things got heated. I did not mean to threaten you. It was a good performance. If I had not read those emails, I might have even believed him. But I knew it was all an act. This was part of the plan. Pressure, then apologize. Wear me down with a combination of aggression and feigned affection." "I need some time, Mark," I said, and closed the door before he could say anything else. I would not let him manipulate me with false apologies. I knew the truth. Later that evening, I got a reply from one of the lawyers. His name was Mr. Evans. His email was brief and professional. He said he had an opening at 9 in the morning and asked if I could be there. I confirmed immediately. Hope, for the first time in weeks, began to flicker within me. Monday morning, I got up early. I dressed in my most professional work attire, a simple, dark suit. I wanted to look composed, in control. When I went downstairs, Mark was in the kitchen, making coffee. He tried to smile at me.
"Good morning," he said.
"I saved you a cup." "No, thank you," I said, grabbing my purse and keys. "I am running late. I have an early meeting." "Oh," he said, his smile faltering. "Okay. Well, will you be home for dinner? Maybe we can sit down and talk properly tonight. Without my mom here." "We will see," I said noncommittally and walked out the door. I did not trust myself to stay in the same room with him for another minute. The urge to scream at him, to show him the pictures on my phone and watch his face crumble, was almost overwhelming. But I knew I had to be patient. I had to be strategic. My confrontation needed to be on my terms, not his. Mr. Evans's office was in a tall, glass building downtown. Everything about it was designed to project an aura of calm confidence. When I was shown into his office, he stood up to shake my hand. He was an older man, with graying hair and a kind, intelligent face. He put me at ease immediately. "Please have a seat," he said. "Your email was brief, but it sounded urgent. Why don't you tell me everything from the beginning?" And I did. I told him about my grandfather, my inheritance, the initial pressure from Mark and Diane. I told him about their coordinated campaign of guilt and manipulation. Then I told him about the power of attorney form, the mysterious real estate deal, and the threat Mark had made. Finally, I took out my phone and showed him the pictures of the emails. He looked at each picture carefully, his expression growing more and more grim. He did not say a word until he had seen all of them. Then he put the phone down on his desk and looked at me, his eyes full of a steely resolve. "This is not just a marital dispute over finances, Clara," he said, his voice low and serious. "This is attempted fraud. They forged your signature. They conspired to deceive you into signing over your assets under false pretenses. This is a very serious situation." Hearing him say it out loud, so plainly, solidified everything for me. This was not just a bad patch in my marriage. This was a crime. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "First, we protect you and your assets," he said, his mind clearly already working through the steps. "We will immediately put a freeze on any joint accounts you have. We will notify your bank and the investment firm that holds your inheritance that no transactions are to be made without your explicit, in-person authorization. We will create a paper trail that shows you are actively protecting your funds." He continued, laying out a clear, concise plan. "Second, We need to decide how you want to proceed. You have enough evidence here to file a police report for fraud and forgery. That is one option. Another option is to use this evidence as leverage in a divorce proceeding.
Divorce.
The word hung in the air. I had known it was coming. I had felt it in my bones since Saturday morning, but hearing it spoken by a lawyer made it real. It was a painful, terrifying word. But it was also a word that held the promise of freedom. Freedom from the constant pressure, the manipulation, the lies. I think I want a divorce, I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. I cannot stay with a man who would do this to me. Mr. Evans nodded slowly. I understand. In that case, this evidence is a very powerful tool. It gives us a significant advantage in the negotiation of the settlement. We can file for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, but we will hold this information in reserve. We will use it to ensure that the division of assets is fair and that he cannot make any claim on your inheritance. He then explained the process. He would draft the divorce papers immediately. He would also draft a letter to Mark and Diane's investor, Gary, informing him that his supposed funding was secured through fraudulent means and that any attempt to proceed with the deal would be met with legal action. This will likely scare him off, Mr. Evans explained. People like that tend to disappear when lawyers get involved. That will pull the rug out from under your husband and his mother's plan. They will be left with a failed deal and no money to show for it. The plan was brilliant. It was strategic. It was powerful. It was everything I needed. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I was no longer a victim, backed into a corner. I was a player in this game, and I had the winning hand. There is one more thing, Mr. Evans said, his expression turning serious again. Your husband. You said he threatened you. Do you feel safe in your home? I thought about Mark's face on Saturday, the fury in his eyes. I thought about his menacing tone. I do not know, I admitted. I do not think he would physically hurt me, but I do not know him anymore. I would advise you not to go back to the house alone, he said. Do you have a friend or family member you can stay with for a few days? I immediately thought of Sarah. Yes, I said. My best friend. Good, he said. Go there. Stay there. Do not speak to your husband or his mother. Let me be your voice from now on. We're going to handle this, Clara. You are not alone anymore. I left his office feeling like a different person. The fear and confusion that had clouded my mind were gone, replaced by a steely sense of purpose. I drove straight to Sarah's apartment. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could even say a word. You look like you have been to war, she said, leading me inside. The war is just beginning, I said. But now I have a general. I spent the next 2 days at Sarah's place. It was a relief to be out of that house, away from the tension and the lies. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from Mark and Diane. I ignored them all, just as Mr. Evans had instructed. The messages went from worried, Clara, where are you? I am so sorry, please come home, to angry, this is childish, Clara. You cannot just run away from your problems. We need to talk about this deal. To desperate, the seller is going to walk. You are ruining everything. I read them all, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. They were no longer my problem. They were Mr. Evans's problem. On Wednesday morning, Mr. Evans called me. The papers are ready, he said. The letters to the bank have been sent. The letter to their investor has been sent. Now it is time for the next step. I think we need to arrange a meeting. A meeting? I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. Yes, he said. At your house. You, your husband, and his mother. I want to be there with you. It is time to put our cards on the table. But we will do it in stages. He explained his plan. He wanted me to call Mark and tell him I was ready to talk. I was to tell him that I had been thinking and that I wanted to find a solution. I was to arrange a meeting for that evening at our house. I was not to mention the lawyer. Mr. Evans would arrive a few minutes after the meeting started. He needs to believe he is still in control, Mr. Evans explained. He and his mother will walk into that meeting expecting to finally break you down. They will be unprepared for what is about to happen. The element of surprise is our greatest weapon. It was a terrifying prospect, but I trusted him. I knew he was right. This was not something that could be handled over the phone. It needed to be done face to face. It was time for the confrontation. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and called my husband. Clara, he answered on the first ring, his voice a mixture of relief and frustration. Where have you been? I have been going out of my mind with worry. I've been at Sarah's, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil I felt inside. I needed some space to think. Okay, I get it, he said quickly. But have you thought? We are about to lose everything, Clara. The deadline is today. I know, I said. That is why I am calling. I want to talk. I will come to the house tonight. At 7". You will? He asked, hope surging in his voice. That is great. That is really great. My mom is here. Is it okay if she stays? She is just so invested in this, you know? Yes, Mark, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. That is fine. I want her to be there too. Perfect, he said, practically giddy with relief. We will see you at 7. We can work this out, Clara. I know we can. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. The trap was set. They thought they were walking into a final negotiation where they held all the power. They had no idea they were walking into the end of their world. I called Mr. Evans and told him it was on. I will be there at 7:15, he said. Stay strong, Clara. You can do this. I spent the rest of the day preparing myself mentally. I went over the events of the past few weeks in my mind, not to dwell on the hurt, but to fuel my resolve. I thought about my grandfather's kind face, his belief in me. I thought about Mark's sneering dismissal of my concerns, Diane's manipulative words, the cold, calculating cruelty of their emails. By the time I left Sarah's apartment that evening, I was not scared anymore. I was ready. I arrived at the house at exactly 7:00. Mark opened the door before I could even knock. He was all smiles, his arm wrapping around me in a possessive hug. It took everything I had not to flinch away from his touch. Diane was sitting on the couch in the living room, a triumphant smirk on her face. The power of attorney form and a pen were sitting on the coffee table in front of her. Clara, darling, she said, her voice oozing fake affection. I am so glad you came to your senses. We were so worried about you. Let's just get this over with, I said, pulling away from Mark and walking over to the armchair opposite the couch. I sat down, creating a physical distance between us. I needed to keep a clear head. Of course, Mark said, sitting down next to his mother. He picked up the form. So, we just need you to sign here and here. Then I can call Gary and tell him the funds are on their way. We can still make this happen. He slid the paper across the coffee table towards me. I did not even look at it. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice calm and even. I want you to tell me about the investment. I want to know everything. Who is Gary? What is the property? What are the risks? Mark and Diane exchanged a quick, nervous glance. This was not part of their script. They expected me to be beaten down, ready to capitulate. They did not expect me to ask questions. It is all very straightforward, Diane said quickly. Gary is my cousin. He is a very experienced real estate developer. He found a wonderful property, undervalued, in an up-and-coming neighborhood. It is a sure thing. A sure thing, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. There is no such thing as a sure thing in real estate. What is the address of this property? That is not important, Mark said dismissively. What is important is the return on investment. Gary says we could double our money in less than a year. The address, Mark, I insisted, my voice hardening. He hesitated, then rattled off an address. It was the same one I had found in the public records. The one with the back taxes and the liens. I see, I said slowly. And you have done your due diligence on this? You have checked the public records? You have seen the tax history? Their faces went pale. I had them. They knew I had them. They just did not know how. That is just bureaucracy, Diane stammered. Gary is taking care of all of that. It is part of the deal. Is it? I asked, leaning forward. And the letter of intent you sent him? The one with my signature on it? Was that part of the deal too? The color drained completely from Mark's face. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. I do not know what you are talking about, he whispered. Don't you? I said, my voice dripping with ice. You do not remember forging my signature on a legal document to make an offer on a property using my inheritance as collateral? You do not remember writing emails to your mother about your plan to trick me into signing a power of attorney? Diane gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark just stared at me, speechless. The air in the room was thick with their guilt and my cold, righteous anger.
How?
How did you? Mark began, his voice trembling. And at that exact moment, the doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell cut through the tense silence like a knife. Mark and Diane both jumped, their eyes darting towards the door, then back to me. The panic on their faces was palpable. They had been caught, completely and utterly, and they had no idea what was coming next. I will get it, I said, my voice calm and steady. I stood up from the armchair, feeling a surge of power. The tables had turned. I was no longer the one being cornered. I was the one in control. I walked to the door and opened it. Mr. Evans was standing on the porch, a briefcase in his hand. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. Good evening, he said, his voice polite but firm. I believe I am expected. I stepped aside to let him in. As he walked into the living room, Mark and Diane stared at him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning horror.
Who?
Who are you? Mark stammered, getting to his feet. My name is Mr. Evans, he said, setting his briefcase down on the coffee table, right next to their power of attorney form. I am Clara's attorney. The word attorney landed in the room like a bomb. Diane let out a small, strangled cry. Mark looked like he had been punched in the stomach. The reality of their situation was crashing down on them. Attorney, Mark repeated, his voice barely a squeak. Clara, what is this? What have you done? What have I done? I asked, turning to face him, my voice ringing with all the anger and betrayal I had been holding back. What have you done, Mark? You lied to me. You conspired with your mother, behind my back. You forged my signature. You tried to steal my inheritance to fund a scam run by your cousin. And you had the audacity to threaten me when I refused to go along with your disgusting little plan. Every word was a blow, and he flinched with each one. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Mr. Evans stepped forward, opening his briefcase. My client has authorized me to inform you of a few things, he said, his tone all business. First, regarding the property at 123 Elm Street. A letter has been sent to Mr. Gary Smith, informing him that the offer made on that property was based on fraudulent representation of funds and a forged signature. We have advised him that any attempt to enforce that offer will be met with a civil lawsuit and a criminal complaint. He paused, letting the words sink in. I suspect you will not be hearing from Mr. Smith again. Your deal is dead. Diane made a whimpering sound, sinking back into the couch cushions. Her get-rich-quick scheme had just evaporated before her eyes. Second, Mr. Evans continued, pulling a sheaf of papers from his briefcase. These are for you, Mark. He handed the papers to Mark, who took them with a trembling hand. He stared down at them, his face ashen. I knew what they were. I could see the bold letters at the top of the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Mark looked up from the papers, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked at me, his expression a desperate, pleading mess. Divorce, he whispered.
Clara, no.
We can fix this. I am sorry. I was desperate. I made a mistake. A mistake? I said, my voice shaking with fury. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash, Mark. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, deliberate betrayal. You looked me in the eye and lied to me. Every single day. You used my love for you as a weapon against me. There is nothing to fix. We are done. The words felt final, absolute. Saying them out loud was like closing a door on a part of my life that was filled with pain and deception.
But
the house, he stammered, looking around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Our life. Everything we built. You were willing to risk all of this for a shady deal with your mother's cousin, I said coldly. You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences. Diane, who had been silent until now, suddenly found her voice. You cannot do this, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. You ungrateful girl. After everything we have done for you, you are throwing it all away. You are destroying my son's life. Your son destroyed his own life, Mr. Evans said, his voice cutting through her tirade. He destroyed it when he decided to commit fraud. And I would advise you to be very careful about what you say next, madam. You were a willing participant in this conspiracy. The emails make that very clear. You are just as culpable as he is. Diane's mouth snapped shut. The threat of legal consequences, of her own involvement being exposed, was enough to silence her. She shrank back into the couch, her face a mask of fury and fear. Mark just stood there, holding the divorce papers, his whole body shaking. The confident, manipulative man who had tried to bully me into submission was gone. In his place was a pathetic, broken shell of a man who had gambled everything and lost. He looked from the papers to my face, his eyes begging for something I could no longer give him. Forgiveness. A second chance.
Pity.
But I felt nothing. The love I once had for him had been burned away by his betrayal, leaving only ashes. I looked at him, at the mess he had made of our lives, and I felt a profound sense of release. I was free. Mr. Evans, I said, turning my back on Mark and his mother. I think we are done here. I will be staying at my friend's house. Please handle all further communication. Of course, Clara, he said. He gathered his papers, closed his briefcase, and gave me a supportive look. I will walk you out. We walked out of the house together, leaving Mark and Diane in the ruins of their scheme. As I closed the front door behind me, I could hear the sound of Diane starting to sob, her cries a mixture of rage and self-pity. I did not look back. I just kept walking towards Mr. Evans's car, towards my new life. The confrontation was over. The fallout was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were a blur of legalities and logistics. Mr. Evans handled everything with brisk efficiency. He filed the divorce papers with the court and began the process of formally separating our finances. A restraining order was put in place, preventing Mark or Diane from contacting me directly. All communication had to go through our lawyers. It was a strange and sterile way to end a marriage, but it was necessary. I needed that barrier to protect myself from their inevitable attempts at manipulation and guilt. Mark, through his newly hired and clearly overwhelmed lawyer, tried to fight back. His initial response to the divorce petition was a claim that he was entitled to half of all marital assets, including my inheritance. He argued that the money had become a marital asset the moment it was inherited during our marriage. Mr. Evans shut that down immediately. He sent Mark's lawyer a carefully curated selection of the emails I had uncovered. He did not send all of them, just enough to make the point. He included the one where Mark talked about Plan B and deceiving me into signing the power of attorney. He also included the forged letter of intent. He attached a note. Should your client wish to pursue his claim on our client's separate and personal inheritance, the note read, we are fully prepared to introduce this evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud in open court. We are also prepared to file a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. We trust you will advise your client accordingly. The response was swift. Within 24 hours, Mark's lawyer called Mr. Evans back. The claim on my inheritance was withdrawn. Mark was now willing to negotiate a simple, uncontested divorce with a standard division of the assets we had acquired together during the marriage. He wanted to avoid court. He wanted to avoid a criminal investigation. He was scared. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction when Mr. Evans told me this. Mark's greed had been his downfall. He had tried to take everything, and in the end, he was going to walk away with nothing but his own debts and a tarnished reputation. While the lawyers handled the divorce, I had to deal with the practical matter of our shared home. Since we were both on the lease, I had to go back to the house to pack my personal belongings. Mr. Evans insisted that I not go alone. He arranged for a civil standby, a police officer who would be present to ensure there were no confrontations. Walking back into that house was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. The officer, a kind but stoic woman, met me at the door. Mark was there, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He looked like he had not slept in days. He was not allowed to speak to me, only to answer direct questions from the officer. I walked through the rooms that had once been filled with laughter and love, now tainted by the memory of lies and betrayal. I packed my clothes, my books, the personal items that were mine long before I had ever met Mark. Every object held a memory, and I had to sort through them, deciding what was worth keeping and what was too painful to look at. As I was packing a box of photos, I came across our wedding album. I opened it, my fingers tracing the smiling faces of our younger selves. We looked so happy, so full of hope. A wave of sadness washed over me, a grief for the marriage I thought I had, for the man I thought Mark was. But it was a fleeting sadness. It was quickly replaced by a sense of clarity. That man in the photos was either an illusion, or he had been lost a long time ago. The man who had threatened me and tried to steal from me was the reality. I closed the album and left it on the table. I did not want it. I did not want any reminders of a life that had been built on a foundation of lies. Diane was not there, for which I was grateful. Mark later told his lawyer that she had gone to stay with a sister out of state. He claimed she was too distraught to face the situation. I suspected she was just hiding, trying to distance herself from the legal mess she had helped create. She had been more than happy to be a co-conspirator when she thought there was a payday involved. Now that it had all blown up, she had abandoned her son to face the consequences alone. It was a fitting end to their toxic partnership. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was a clean break. We sold the house and split the proceeds. I used my share to put a down payment on a small condo in a different part of town. A place that was all mine, a place where I could feel safe. Mark, I heard through the grapevine, had to move back in with his parents. His credit was ruined, and he was struggling to find a job that paid enough to support himself. The consequences of his actions were real and lasting. One of the most satisfying moments came a few weeks after the divorce was final. I got a call from Emily, Mark's sister. She and I had always been friendly, but we were not close. I was surprised to hear from her. "Clara," she said, her voice hesitant. I know it is probably too late, but I wanted to say I am sorry." "Sorry for what?" I asked, confused. "For what Mark and my mother did to you," she said. "I only just found out the whole story. Mark finally broke down and told me everything. The emails, the forgery. I am so ashamed of them." She went on to tell me that Diane's cousin, Gary, had disappeared. He had taken some preliminary consulting fees from Diane before the deal fell through, and now he was nowhere to be found. Diane had lost her savings, and she was blaming everyone but herself. She was making Mark's life miserable, constantly reminding him of how he had failed her. "They are a mess," Emily said, a note of disgust in her voice. "They deserve each other. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is like that. I always liked you, Clara. You deserved better." Her words meant more to me than she could ever know. It was a validation that I was not crazy, that I had not overreacted. The toxicity of Mark and Diane's relationship was clear to everyone, not just me. Life after the divorce was quiet at first. I focused on my work, on setting up my new home, on rediscovering who I was without Mark. I reconnected with old friends. I took up hobbies I had let slide during my marriage. I slowly, carefully, began to build a new life for myself, one based on my own choices and my own desires. I kept the inheritance exactly where my grandfather had wanted it to be, safely invested, growing steadily, a quiet testament to his love and foresight. It was no longer a source of conflict and stress. It was what it was always meant to be, a foundation for my future, a symbol of my independence. One day, about a year after the divorce, I was having coffee with Sarah. We were laughing about something silly when my phone buzzed. It was an email from my financial advisor, Linda. It was my annual portfolio review. I opened it and looked at the numbers. The investments had done well. The amount had grown significantly. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. It was not about the money itself. It was about what it represented. It represented my freedom. It represented my victory over manipulation and greed. It represented the future that my grandfather had wanted for me, a future that I had fought for and won. I looked up at Sarah, who was watching me with a knowing look in her eyes. "Good news?" she asked. "The best," I said, and I meant it. The fallout with Mark and Diane was not a single event, but a series of cascading failures for them. Emily's call was just the beginning of my understanding of how deep their self-destruction ran. A few months after that call, I ran into a former neighbor from my old neighborhood at the grocery store. After the initial awkward pleasantries, she leaned in conspiratorially. "I heard about what happened with Mark and Diane," she said, her voice low. "It is all over the neighborhood. Diane has been telling everyone that you were some kind of gold digger who took Mark for everything he had." I felt a flash of anger, but it quickly subsided. "And do people believe her?" I asked, genuinely curious. The neighbor laughed. "Are you kidding? Nobody has ever liked Diane. We all saw how she treated you, how she treated everyone. And we all saw how Mark let her walk all over him. When the story came out that they tried to scam you out of your inheritance. Well, let's just say nobody was surprised. Everyone is on your side, Clara." It was a small thing, but it was incredibly validating. Their attempt to slander me, to paint me as the villain, had backfired completely. They had exposed themselves for who they truly were, and their community had judged them accordingly. They were socially isolated, their reputations in tatters. The financial consequences for them were even more severe. Without my inheritance to bail them out, the full weight of their poor financial decisions came crashing down. Mark had to declare bankruptcy. The new car, the golf clubs, the life he had been living on credit, it all disappeared. He was forced to sell almost everything of value just to pay his legal fees and his outstanding debts. I learned from Emily that he and Diane were constantly at each other's throats. She blamed him for not being man enough to control me. He blamed her for pushing him into the disastrous scheme with her cousin. Their toxic alliance, once united in its goal to take my money, had curdled into a bitter, resentful codependency. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, and there was no escape. For me, the resolution was not just about their downfall. It was about my own growth. The experience had forced me to find a strength I never knew I had. I learned to trust my instincts, to stand up for myself, to draw firm boundaries. I was no longer the quiet, accommodating woman who would do anything to keep the peace. I was a woman who knew her own worth, and who would not allow anyone to diminish it. My relationship with Mr. Evans continued on a professional level. He was impressed with how I had handled the situation, and he became a trusted advisor. He helped me set up a proper trust for my inheritance, ensuring that it was protected for the future. "You are very brave, Clara," he told me during one of our meetings. "Many people would have buckled under that kind of pressure.
You fought back.
You should be proud of that." And I was. I was proud of the woman I had become. The final, lingering note of the whole affair came about 2 years after the divorce. I was at a downtown restaurant, having dinner with a new man in my life, a kind and respectful man named David, who treated me as an equal. As we were leaving, I saw Mark. He was working as a waiter at the restaurant. He was wearing a stained white apron, and he looked tired and much older than his years. He saw me at the same time I saw him. His eyes widened, and a look of pure shame washed over his face. He quickly turned away, pretending to be busy at another table. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I did not feel anything at all. He was just a stranger, a ghost from a past life that no longer had any power over me. David put his arm around me. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sensing the shift in my mood. I looked up at him and smiled. "Everything is perfect," I said. As we walked out into the cool night air, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. I had survived, and I had thrived. Mark and Diane had tried to take my future from me, but in the end, they had only succeeded in destroying their own. My grandfather had left me a gift, and the greatest part of that gift was not the money. It was the chance to build a life on my own terms, a life of strength, independence, and true happiness. They had learned what it feels like to lose everything, and I had finally learned what it feels like to be free. I stopped giving warnings to people who showed me who they were. I started believing them the first time. It was a hard lesson, but it was one that had saved me. They finally learned what it feels like to be small, to be powerless, to have their future dictated by the consequences of their own choices. And I learned that my future was mine, and mine alone, to command.